So I believe that teachers got into the profession because they really want to do what's right for kids and they really care about what's kids. And when you stick them in this industrial model, it's terrible for the teachers too. I mean, it's like, you can barely go to the bathroom other than in this 2-minute break. And then if you come in and sort of say, here's this top-down better answer, teachers, just like anyone, are going to feel suspicious of that. But if you go through a community-based process where teachers are actually part of generating the new answer, just like we said in the consulting world, it unleashes enormous excitement and energy on the part of teachers too. But you have to design not just what's good for kids, but also what's good for teachers too.
Today, my guest is an expert in helping people develop real relationships that are authentic, genuine, and increase productivity, increase a positive culture, and of course, create revenue. So welcome today's podcast guest, Jeff Wetzler, to our podcast. Did I say your name right, Jeff?
It's Wetzler, but you were very close.
Oh, and I should have asked you when we chatted before, and for some reason we're two New Yorkers, so I had to get in right away with the bonding. Exactly. So welcome, Jeff. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Okay. So, what I'd like to start with is, why don't you tell us something about yourself that most people don't know about?
Okay. I think that most people don't know that growing up, and all through high school and college, I had this side gig of being a professional magician. It is something that is actually in the lineage of my family, multiple generations back. Different, on my father's side, different family members of mine were magicians, one way or the other. And for me, growing up, it was a job. It was a source of income. I used to perform, birthday parties and bar mitzvahs and other different things like that. And it was, it was a lot of fun. And I think it has deeply shaped me today as well.
That is so interesting. So tell me, I definitely think it is so interesting and impacts the work that you do today. But tell me how your family got started in being a magician. That's so interesting.
To be totally
honest, all I can think of.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how they got started. I know that there's this kind of lore of my great uncle performing with the famous magician called Thurston. And just over the years,
in the States or over in Russia,
in the States, in the US, yeah. And it was one of those things that just got passed down, and even literally, some of the physical tricks got passed down over the years. And then I took a liking to it, and it was something that brought me a lot of fulfillment, growing up.
Now, did your dad do it for a living, or he did it as a hobby?
Just as a hobby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So give us one secret that magicians use that gives the illusion, I guess. Is that what you're creating, an illusion?
Yeah.
All right. So spill the beans on one secret.
Well, I shouldn't tell it. It wouldn't be honoring the magician's code if I told you about any particular trick. But I will say that
everybody watched. What's
Penn and Teller?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Penn and Teller. But what I will say is that magicians spend a lot of time thinking about their audience, and what their where their audience attention is going. And if you're a magician, what you want to do is essentially control the attention of your audience.
You create distraction.
So that it's called misdirection. And so that you're essentially having them pay attention to what you want them to pay attention to, not to whatever the thing is that you're actually doing. And then ultimately, when they put their attention back to what you're doing, it looks like, something that is completely impossible has just happened. But that act of really so deeply putting yourself in someone else's shoes and saying, how must they see the world? And what are they thinking about? What are they feeling? All that. Magicians do it to try to deceive people. But I actually believe it's one of the most important skills that people in life and in organizations need to develop, which is, how do you put yourself as much as possible in the shoes of someone else, have deep empathy for how they're experiencing things, and act accordingly.
Okay, so beautiful segue. But I do have to ask one more question about the magic.
Of course.
Because I know for us, and it's one of the questions you asked, right? Like, who's the audience? You want to be where the audience is.
Yeah.
But did it matter really significantly, as opposed to, of course, young children versus adults? Did it matter who the audience was when you were doing magic tricks?
It's a really good question. At some level, I think the general techniques of things like misdirection and putting yourself in the audience's shoes and things like that, it doesn't really matter because humans are humans. I think adults are a little more cynical
Suspicious?
or a little bit more suspicious than kids.
Yeah.
So you have to raise your game. The kinds of stories that you have to tell to adults are a little different than what you could tell to kids. But kids are fun because when they are suspicious, they will not hold back. They will not be polite. They will say, "It's over there. I know it's over there. You just opened that thing." And of course, you can have a lot of fun with that. But at the end of the day, people are people.
Okay. All right. So tell us, how did you get into the work that you're doing today? Like, give us Jeff's career trajectory post magic, when I guess he got married and had kids and had to make a living.
Sure. So I started my career at a place called Monitor Group, which was based in Boston, but it was a global consulting firm. And I thought I was going to
Is it still around?
It's still around, although it's part of Deloitte now. They've merged. And
went to the dark side.
Exactly. But when I joined Monitor out of college, their recruitment slogan was a place for optimists to change the world. And it really, that really drew me in because I was young and idealistic. It also drew me in that they had somebody who was one of the senior people was a person named Chris Argyris, who was a former professor both of business and education. And he was known as one of the leaders of the field of organizational behavior and organizational learning. And he asked this question that was fascinating to me, which is why is it that sometimes the smartest and most, quote, successful people are the worst at learning from each other? And are the worst at really kind of tapping into the insights around them. And so all of that drew me in. But I thought I was going to stay there for a couple of years, go off to grad school, maybe be a professor, who knows what. I ended up staying for a decade because I was just so taken in by the people, this opportunity to learn with Chris Argyris, and also had the chance to do some very fulfilling work there with clients all around the world. Go ahead, we can jump in.
Okay, so here's my question to you. This is not a nice question, and it's not directed towards you. It's directed to the consulting industry. So I'm always amazed that consulting firms hire kids out of college, because we're at the stage where you're a kid when you're out of college.
Absolutely.
And they know nothing about life.
Yes.
They know nothing about business. There's theory and there's the real world. And I know this because I get calls from my friends' kids saying, can they talk to you because they're on this project and they want to know what to do? I'm like, well, what is the deal with really adding value as a consultant? Like, I understand the theory, but so much of what and people pay a lot of money for them to come in, and they'll create the binders like this, because they got to get, the money's worth. And then they'll implement it. And then 2 or 3 years, they're like, yeah, this is crap. And they throw it out.
Well,
that's the skeptical.
There's a few different parts to your question.
Yes,
and I love all
nice. I warned you.
I love all questions, including not nice questions. I mean, I couldn't have written the book about
asking
questions.
Saying.
Yeah. So I think there's two parts to what you're saying. One is, what's the role of really young junior people on consulting teams and on consulting projects, especially consulting projects that are like, reporting to the CEO of organizations. And I will say that I think the answer is changing, especially in the world of AI, because most of what I did as a junior person on the project was research and analysis and synthesis and even taking notes and pulling all these things. I mean, all of these things AI can do just as well.
Gathering information.
Gathering information and synthesize it.
In a New York minute, right.
Totally. So I don't know that it's...
There go the factory law firms too.
Totally.
As associate. Yeah.
But there was a model in management consulting at the time called a pyramid model of teams, where there was a very senior person at the top. And that was the person who was really counseling the CEO. But then there was kind of a pyramid. There was a couple of people more junior.
Well, my understanding was the really senior person goes out there, gets the job, and then is never to be seen from again.
But they're still counseling the CEO. When it comes time for the presentation of the CEO, that's who's giving the presentation to the CEO. When it comes time for key moments, they're there. but essentially then there's the next layer down in the pyramid of pretty senior people who are essentially directing the work day to day. And then you've got more junior people and all the way, and kind of all the way down
The
to the
worker
bottom.
bees. The
worker bees. So I was a worker bee. And there was lots of that kind of work to do. I think much of which will be replaced. So there was a real role for it. And CEOs would pay for it because ultimately the totality of that pyramid would produce answers and change that was valuable enough for the CEO.
Well, there's an expression in the entrepreneurial world that, now I'll take the other side. I'll speak out of the other side of my mouth. There's an expression in the entrepreneurial world that I'm a big part of that says you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. Right?
Yes.
So if you're running a company, sometimes we all can't see just what's in front of us. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Now, to your question about do they produce change that actually sticks and value? I think it varies based on the project. But one of the things that Monitor tried to do, and this is actually a lot of the reason why they had someone like Chris Ardress, is they were not coming in to just sort of give a recommendation that would sit on the shelf. They were actually trying to engage the organization and to teach. And we trained our consultants on how do you not just come in some top-down way and say, I'm here because of the CEO, you got to do what I say, but to actually say, what do you think? And what's your experience? And how's it going to, and how is this going to work or not? And what if this is not going to work? Tell me why, so that we both get to the best answers, but we do it in ways that create commitment on the part of the client at every level.
So you're looking for the buy-in. Totally get that. Here's my question. How did you know, this is really difficult. How did you know that when you're asking for the buy-in and will this work? What do you think? Right? Which we still do today, you and I in companies.
Yeah.
Did you know that any resistance wasn't just built in the human nature aspect of people just don't want change? Like, how could you differentiate between, oh, that's never going to work here? I interviewed the co-founder of Netflix from New York also. And I think he wrote the book, That'll Never Work Here. And everything was no, 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 right? Everything is no until you do it. Like, you can't have an electrical car. I'm not getting into politics until someone creates it, right? You can't go to the moon unless someone creates it. So how did you know when you were asking whether it was just the reflexive no versus no, it really can't work here? And these are the reasons.
Well, this is what we got trained in how to do, which is what I've tried to bring into the book. We'll get to that. But is basically you don't just stop at yes or no, this will work here. Tell me more. How come?
Why?
Has it happened before? And what if this piece was tweaked? And that's a good point. It wouldn't work. Do you have any ideas for how we could overcome that? And ultimately, if we're co-creating the solution, not just coming back with the smart consultants have the answer, but we're actually facilitating a process where people who live it day to day are part of coming up with the new direction and the ways of implementing it, then you stand a greater chance of it actually sticking.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I do think good coaches, good consultants work that way. I mean, you always want to hear what the objections are, what the resistance are. And, there's a strategy I use when I'm doing workshops where people's like, that won't work. And I just say, well, just change the word yet.
Yes, I love that. I love adding the word yet.
When your kids say, I don't know this, I can't learn this yet. And it shifts the mind.
It's a magic word. It's a magic shift. I love how language can do that as well.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you. So you're there for 12 years and
about 10 years.
Pulled you away? Okay. Yeah. All right. 10 years. Okay. After a decade, what was called?
I had a client at Monitor.
Well, they poached you.
Essentially, it was called Teach for America. It was a
Teach for America is an awesome program. This still exists, right?
Still exists. Yeah. It was my client for 5 years, and it was not one of those. We charged a big discount, and in some cases did it for pro bono because they were a nonprofit organization, and so I wasn't supposed to be spending a lot of my time working with Teach for America. I was supposed to be working with a lot of, but I found that over those 5 years, and I had the chance to get to know Wendy Kopp, who was the founder and CEO at the time, just an incredible, iconic leader. I was spending more and more time, more than I was supposed to be spending. And I was just feeling such alignment with the mission of the organization. And the final project that I did with Wendy was a big growth diagnostic to see, would Teach for America be ready essentially to double in size over the next 5 years? And at the end of that project, and we had redesigned the organization and sort of said, here's how you need to set things up for the next, era. She pointed to one of the boxes in the org chart and said, would you lead that by part of the organization? And I wasn't necessarily looking to leave Modern.
I love the visual. I love the visual.
Yeah.
That was actually very smart on her part.
Yeah, she's brilliant. And I said, you know what? Let me see if Modern will give me a leave of absence to do this, to just try it. And I said to her, how about I do it for a year? And she said, a year won't work. This is too hard, the work that we do. If you do it for a year, at the end of the year, you're going to feel like it's too challenging. You're going to be ready to leave. I need you to make a 2-year commitment to me. So I went back to Monitor and they said, okay, 2 years. So I jumped in and I took on the role of being responsible for the training and support of the teachers of Teach for America across the country. Mm-hmm. We call them core members. And at the end of the 2 years, I was having so much fun. It was so challenging. I loved the people. It was actually better run than most of my corporate clients in terms of how ambitious the organization was and how hard charging it was and how data driven it was and, the outcomes that we were getting. I ended up staying for a decade at Teach for America. And we grew the organization, we grew the core, we grew the results. And so that was chapter 2, essentially, of my career.
And basically Teach for America is still there. And if I understand correctly, lots of like student loans can be forgiven or something if you do Teach for America.
Yes, it's part of the AmeriCorps
we are in New
program.
York, right?
Yeah.
I know people go, actually, you'll appreciate this. They'll Teach for America in the Bronx, right? And actually my sister taught math in the Bronx. But, and then they'll go to, say, Fairfield County, right? I call that to the manor born. And then they'll go back to the Bronx because they feel like the kids in the Bronx are spongy and absorb everything, as opposed to the entitled kids of Fairfield County. Now, I know that's a gross oversimplification for both statements, but there is something to be said for kids yearning to learn.
Absolutely. And Teach for America places its core members in some of the most underserved communities in the country. And most of the time, people end up devoting their careers to serving underserved populations. Right. Whether that's, a third of them actually remain teachers forever. Another third remain in education. Yeah. Another third remain in education in other positions forever, like school principals or administrators or social workers or whatever. And 80% of them, one way or another, devote their career to serving low-income populations as well. And so many people don't know that about Teach for America, but it really channels incredible talent to some of the most deserving communities.
So I'll go a little bit off on a tangent. I want to get your feedback on this. So, the world is sort of kind of on fire. We all know that, right? The country's on fire. Yes, we all know that.
This is true.
My husband is convinced. Now, we will never bring back the draft. We know that won't happen. But my husband is convinced that after college or after high school, right? Like Teach for America, it's right after college. If children had to do 2-year service, it can be Peace Corps, it can be Teach for America, it can be anything. He feels very strongly a lot of the self-centered, it's all about me, would dissipate. Right. What are your thoughts? Because
I totally
that's
agree.
What you're just saying, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with your husband. I think something like national service, whether that's military or whether that's social service or whatever else, not only would do what you say, but I also think it would be an opportunity to bridge some of the divisions in our country, because people, people would be in very tight working relationships with people from all over the country.
Look, there's no racism in a foxhole.
Yeah,
there is no racism in a foxhole.
There you go.
Like, it's unbelievable, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And what that does for relationships over lifetimes can be incredible. Right. So I'm a huge proponent of service.
Right. I mean, it's amazing. I didn't know that statistic. What you just said, though, absolutely is a part of that. Okay, so you go for Teach for America, and then what?
So that was essentially decade number 2.
Everything's always people driven for you, though.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the common thread for me is learning, creating powerful learning experiences. So
why are you so passionate about learning? Like, what is it about learning that really you feel, it feels like you're passionate about? I am too, but I want to know what strikes you.
Thank you. Yeah, it is like my number one core value in life. And I both learning for myself, I love to learn, but also creating environments where other people can really learn, both adults and young people. I'm not sure exactly, where it came from, but I can tell you that when I was growing up as a kid, every year when I was, let's say in 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade, if you asked me what I wanted to be, I wanted to be a teacher of that grade that I was in. And I was thinking, whenever I was in class, I was thinking to myself, because I was a little bit bored, what would I do differently if I were the teacher? How could I make this learning even better, even more enlightening and more enriching? And so I've just
listen, Jeff, you know the educational system is broken, probably better than me. You know, it was created, I think it was by Dewey, to get people to be able, when we left the farms into the city, to be on an assembly line, right? So everybody learns this information to follow orders. That's boring. That's all hell if you have a brain.
Exactly. Well, and that's a perfect segue to what I do now, because in 2015, I left Teach for America, and together with a colleague of mine named Elon Samoa, co-founded an organization called Transcend, where I'm currently the co-CEO. And Transcend essentially
with this person that you just described?
Elon, exactly. Yes.
Elon. Okay.
Transcend takes on the question of how do we innovate beyond the industrial model of education? Because as you just said, we've had the same model of schooling for 100 years.
Nothing is run the same way for 3 years, let alone 100 years. It's insane.
If you fell asleep,
we could get into teacher union, like we could get into that, which I swore
we could get into all of it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, but if you were 100 years ago, if you fell asleep and woke up today, you would not recognize anything in transportation. You would not recognize anything in media, technology, healthcare. It would be like, where am I? But if you walk into a school, you would say, oh, I know where I am. Nothing's changed.
So really, when you think about that, Jeff, that is so sad.
I know.
Like, that really hurts my heart, because without knowledge and learning, we'd be, with the flint. And it's
painful on so many levels. It's, that just think about the human potential that is just sitting in seats and being told to sit down and shut up and repeat back what we're learning and take a test.
Right.
I mean, there's so much human potential. Think about the problems in the world that we could be solving if we could actually develop that human potential. And as you said, the world's kind of on fire. We have enough problems that we need everybody's greatest potential to be dealing with. It's also inequitable because children from lower income backgrounds suffer from it even more. Children of color suffer
because there's no school choice, which I guess
all of that. Yeah, exactly.
Really.
Yeah. Totally.
And everybody has their own, again, I think it's Dan Sullivan talks about your unique ability. So even if you're not good in math, you might be brilliant in creativity, it doesn't matter where your brilliance is. The world needs it. And to your point, it's not allowed to even germinate. It's unbelievable.
So Transcend exists to essentially reimagine what schooling can be. And we work with communities all across the country. We have about 125 full-time people.
I got to tell you something. I take issue with the word reimagine, respectfully. Okay. It's imagine. What is what are you reimagining? Just imagine. But anyway, that's my pet peeve.
Well, the factory model was imagined at one point in time. And so now it's time we say it now, it's time to reimagine what it could be.
No, everybody says it. I'm just like, no, imagine. It's true.
We can imagine something new.
Exactly.
And we work with communities across the country, hundreds of communities who want to go through what we call a design journey, where students and family members and educators and administrators and local employers and others in the community come together and say, what do we want for our graduates? What do we want them to actually know and be able to do? And then
it's a coalition.
It's a coalition. We call it a community-based process. And to your point earlier about does consulting recommendations stay on the shelf or does it get used? I learned back then, and we believe now, that when a community coalition comes together, you're far more likely to get a solution that endures beyond a superintendent change or a school principal change, because everyone was part of building it. And we help these coalitions come together and say, here's what we want for our kids. And then here's what we want school to look like and be like. And we design it and we pilot it and we test it and we find innovative programs elsewhere and we build them in. And ultimately, communities go through this journey, over months and years, and they continue to evolve what school can be to the point where, 5 or 6 years later, it looks nothing like what it started with. And so it's been, it's been very inspiring to get to work with innovative communities across the country.
It sounds amazing. So what has been the most surprising request that you've gotten? This is what we want it to look like. And it took you, I wouldn't say took you off your game, but just maybe silently thinking that horrible, that's not going to work. We can't do that here. Right. And lo and behold, you created a program and it works and it's thriving.
Yeah. I'll tell you some of the most kind of interesting
You're looking
out
at your
there
notes.
was. No. I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking because I don't think I've ever had the reaction, that's never going to work. We shouldn't do that. I've had the reaction, oh, that's interesting. What would it take to make that work? But I would say, so here's a couple answers. One is there's a school district we work with in California called Lindsay Unified School District, and they have basically said education doesn't need to follow this time-based system where when you're 9 years old, you're in fourth grade, and 1 year later you become into fifth grade, no matter how hard you work or they basically say, let us move to a mastery-based system. And so they have
Isn't that like Montessori or no?
Montessori there's a version of that where Montessori has these grade bands in 3 levels. And so they do it, in the, within bands. But can you imagine a whole public district, basically, when you say to a kid, what are you doing? They don't say, they wouldn't say, I'm a fourth grader or I'm a third grader. They would say, here's what I do in math, here's what I do in English, and I move as fast as I can based on my performance and my mastery. And all of a sudden, it unleashes just an enormous amount of motivation, because kids who before knew, well, if I work hard, I don't work hard, if I learn, I'm still going to move to the next grade. It kind of doesn't matter. All of a sudden realize I can fly. I can, whatever I put in, I can move. And by the way, they've built an incredible culture. So it's not just about me for myself, but I want my friends to move too. And so we're going to work together and we're going to build a community and we're not going to leave people behind. And it's been kind of transformational for that.
So let me ask a question. Was this Northern or Southern California? I'm just curious.
Central Valley of California. Yeah.
Central. Okay. Cause that's, the innovative land.
Right.
For sure. But what any resistance from the teachers where they have the system? I have the wrong, I don't have the word, where this is the teaching plan and this is what we follow.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you have to recreate all that and people get a little lazy.
Well, so I believe that teachers got into the profession because they really want to do what's right for kids and they really care about what's kids. And when you stick them in this industrial model, it's terrible for the teachers too. I mean, it's like, you can barely go to the bathroom other than in this 2-minute break. And,
that's the joke with the teachers. They learn to hold their pee.
They learn to hold. Exactly. And then if you come in and sort of say, here's this top down better answer, teachers, just like anyone, are going to feel suspicious of that. But if you go through a community-based process where teachers are actually part of generating the new answer, just like we said in the consulting world, it unleashes enormous excitement and energy on the part of teachers too. But you have to design not just what's good for kids, but also what's good for teachers too. And when you do that, COVID even showed us teachers can change. We all can change. We all had to learn how to use technology. We had to, teach remotely, teach differently, et cetera. And so teachers are capable of changing. If there's a process that works for them too. And we design something that works for them too. So that's one example. We have other examples where kids are actually, working and getting college, not just college, but even like job credentials while they're working, so that by the time they graduate, they can go to college. They could also make a middle-class wage. They could go to college and do a side gig and pay for college. So there's some really innovative places, including places in New York City, like Brooklyn Steam Center, which is in the Naval Yard in Brooklyn, that's doing that kind of work.
I grew up not far from there. It was a disaster when I lived there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So let me ask this question that might be like, oh, don't go there. How does this compare to kids that are being homeschooled? Which when I was growing up, I felt the kids that were homeschooled were just like, really? Today, I'm like, I sort of kind of get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it turns out that 10% of kids in this country are homeschooled, which is, to me,
that
when I learned that,
going up.
It's going up.
Right?
It's growing by 50% every year. It's the fastest segment of growth in different sectors of schooling in the entire country.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be doing the teaching. I would do get a pod, a bunch of people, and have the teacher. I don't know how I would do it. I wouldn't be doing it though.
Well, I think that's part of why it's growing, is that there's so many more options out there now. The kids, there's so much on video, even now AI. There's ways to bring people together. You can get your kids a teacher from anywhere in the world for this particular subject or that particular subject.
Crazy,
and so
right?
it's no longer this kind of isolating thing of, kids have to be home and the parent has to do all the ways. It is exploding in terms of opportunities. I also think that kids and parents are voting with their feet and saying, we're done with this industrial model of education.
Yeah.
If there's some other option, even if we have to do it ourselves, we can do that. And some states are making it more possible for parents to do that by creating education savings accounts where parents can tap into some money as well to help them do
that's
these
when the
kinds of things
hornets,
too.
that's touching the hornet's nest.
That is touching the hornet's
Right.
nest.
If you
It's
can
true.
take your educational dollars and move, look, we just talked about you grew up in Connecticut. I raised my family in Connecticut, right? My real estate value when I raised my kids in Stanford was less than Greenwich, Darien, and New Canaan. Now the top 10% kids are all the same.
Yep.
But we had an inner city, right? So our scores came down. Nobody wanted to live there. We wanted that diversity, right? Well, then all of a sudden you say to the surrounding communities, well, now the kids from Stanford could go to your community. Stop the presses. It's like a riot.
It's a political hot button. And there's all kinds of, I think, very, not good equity issues that come along with that as well.
Right. Right. Okay. So do you see the homeschooling as, do you go into the homeschools and is that an opportunity for Transcend?
So to date, we have worked primarily with public schools, with district schools and with charter schools. We haven't done as much
not private,
a little bit with private, but very, we have a commitment to working with the public education system and strengthening the public education system. But over time, my role is going to start to shift in Transcend, and I'm going to start to explore some new horizons, including things like micro schools and homeschools and pods and different things like that.
Okay.
Because it's such a fast growing segment. So I'm excited to learn more about that and to think about, is there some way that we can support that as well? And also learn from that and bring that into the public system too.
Great. And how is your company? How much has it grown in the last, let's say pre-COVID to now?
Yeah, COVID turned out to be major accelerator for the growth. We had 30, 40 people prior to COVID. And when COVID hit, I was honestly not sure if we were going to survive. I wasn't sure, our school's going to have money? Are they going to be having just be putting out fires? Are they going to, anybody want to work with us?
Really?
And our funders going to move all their money to, just emergency relief. So I was stressed, but it turned out very quickly that schools needed the kind of help to redesign that we do.
Oh, desperately.
They desperately needed it. So we pivoted the organization to really focus on remote and hybrid learning, and how to help schools, work in this context that they were in. And then to say, essentially, we call it recovery to reinvention. So let's recover from COVID, but let's not go back to what we have. Let's go.
I like that. I wish the business world would hear that.
By now, so if we had 30 or 40 people before COVID, we now have 125 plus people on staff. And the demand is very strong. More and more communities want to be doing this kind of work. And so we had to catch up with the growth. I mean, during COVID, to be honest, we grew faster probably than we were ready for in some ways, but we wanted to lean into the need and lean in to show up for communities. And so, we've been playing catch up in terms of our internal systems and all those kinds of things. But we're in a much stronger place now than we've ever been before.
Exciting. Very exciting. Okay. So I know you're chomping at the bit to talk to us about your book, Ask. So tell us.
Well, I'll just say, the common thread throughout all of these different experiences I've been talking about has been learning. And it started with, what I talk about with Chris Argyris back at Monitor, who was asking this question: why is it that smart people and successful people have such a hard time learning from the people around them?
I have an answer for that too.
Well, what's your answer? I'm curious.
We haven't gone there yet.
Tell me your answer.
Well, and I actually wanted to talk to you later about this. Okay. How much are you teaching emotional intelligence, right? Like if you ask kids, if you ask an adult who's taken a math class, every hand goes up. Who's taken a history class, every hand goes up. If you ask most kids, not college, but up to 12th grade, who's taken a course on emotional intelligence, if any, hands go up. So when somebody is so smart and yet they don't have a growth mindset, a la Carol Dweck, or they haven't learned that curiosity is the key, that you're smiling. I'm not sure what I'm saying.
I totally agree.
Opens
it's resonating.
Up the door. So this is why, and I see this in my work all the time, really, really smart people are not as successful as they otherwise could be, because they do think they know everything. But the secret is, if there's a secret, is that really smart people know they do not know everything.
You got it.
As a matter of fact, the more I learn about, and I never studied history. I always studied science. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't really learn, like, I didn't know anything about history other than the basic requirement to graduate from NYU, which was one history course, right? Till I was 40. I mean, I'm young now, so, it was just last year. But anyway,
right.
Having said that, and now I'm fascinated by it. And also with neuroscience, like I don't know where to go and where to learn. And there's so many ways to learn. And yet it's what I personally find is, oh my God, the more I learn, the more I'm like, I don't know anything. Like, how do I not know that? Like when I study history, I'm like, how did I not know that?
Totally. And it's funny you say that, just as a side tangent. I went to a college that had no requirements, and I chose not to take a single history class.
Wait. I saw where you went. Did you go to Brown?
I went to Brown. Exactly.
Brown.
There was no requirement.
Which is a fake Ivy League according to Princeton, but I'm sure you know that, right? Because I said that once to a Brown graduate, and she said to me, oh, the person that said that she went to Princeton. I'm like, yeah. And then they told me the whole, thing.
I'll just say no comment. But
no, it's all, look, I'm
exactly.
just joking.
I know.
I don't take anything too seriously.
I'm just teasing. But I chose not to take a history class. And on the one hand, I think I benefited a lot from.
So I upped you by one.
You upped me by one, but I regret it now.
I don't even know the time of history that I took.
Right.
It literally just fit into my schedule. I can't even tell you what era of history. How pathetic is it?
Totally. And I'm now like, how could I not have studied that? But, so I think your answer to this question of why are smart, successful people not good at learning from others matches a lot of what Chris Ardress said. And he also talked about basically how people get to be in successful positions in many ways by kind of demonstrating success, by showing that they are smart, by showing they have the right answer, and they don't get a lot of practice failing, and they don't get a lot of practice admitting that they need help. And yet that's what you need to do if you're going to learn from other people, is to say, I don't know this, and can you help me learn this? And so at Monitor, I learned from Chris and some incredible other mentors a set of tools to help smart, successful people actually get better at learning from other people, including I think a lot of what would go under the what you talk about as emotional intelligence. These tools were just so foundationally helpful to me in my own leadership. They are what got me to be able to change industries quickly. They were build teams, run teams, and and also overcome a lot of errors that I made myself. And they also became the thing that I went to when I would coach and develop the people around me. And so a few years ago, I said, I think it's time to pay it forward. I think it's time to actually help other people beyond the people I get to work directly with benefit from all of these amazing tools and ideas and insights that Chris and other mentors have poured into me, and that I have been able to synthesize and refine based on other experiences that I've had. And I said, let's put it together and let's try to pay it forward. And so that was the genesis of the book Ask. And I'm happy to talk more about the content of it too, but that's where it came from.
Okay, so that's great. So give us the 3 most valuable takeaways from your book. Because clearly, I mean, you're such a giver. You're so smart. You clearly are people driven, right? So I can imagine all the unbelievable information you have in there. So what are the 3 main takeaways that you want people to get, other than me encouraging you to please go get the book? Because I love what you're talking about.
Thank you. So I would say number 1 is this idea that each one of us is surrounded by people in our lives. Those could be our partners, our clients, our colleagues, the people we manage, our bosses, our investors, whoever it may be. And the people that we're surrounded with hold in their minds a set of ideas, insights, feedback, perspectives that if we knew, we would be better off together. We would make better decisions together. We would innovate together. We would save time together. We'd be closer in our relationship together. But far too often, the people around you are not telling you all of what they really know, think, and feel. They're holding it back.
Well, that's a cultural thing. That's people not speaking truth to power.
And that is one of the multiple reasons why people hold back. We are culturally conditioned to do that, and people can be afraid that they're not. That if they actually speak the truth, it's gonna they're going to get punished.
Well, I meant the culture within the organization.
Totally. Yeah. If
you have a toxic boss, or a boss always has to be right, they say something, you're not going to buck it, because there goes your career.
Totally. And that's not a psychologically safe culture. But
correct.
That's not the
only, which is many of them.
which is many of them. But I will say this is not limited to bosses. This is people, I even saw in consulting. This is, clients not telling the consultant what they really think. I found in the research for the book, I even found this powerful statistic that between 60 and 80% of Americans, depending on their background, have not told their doctor something important about their own health. Maybe like, I'm not taking the medicine in the way you told me to, or I'm not changing my diet, or, any number of different things.
I drink more than I'm telling you.
More than I'm telling. But imagine that we're not even telling our own doctors something that could help our own health. Maybe it's life and death. Doctors are not finding these things out from one another. And so it's pervasive, this withholding that's happening for all kinds of reasons. So what I want to say to people as point number one of the 3 big points is that you are surrounded by a set of ideas and insights, and I would even say collective genius in your life that you are probably not tapping into, that is probably being withheld from you in ways that you don't even realize what you don't know. So that's point number one.
Okay. Can I give it a tool that's probably, I'm sure you have a much better one, but I will tell you the one that I use.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing this at a leadership meeting or one-on-one coaching, and I'll say, okay, so tell me what I should know about this issue or challenge or whatever. And sometimes people go on and on and on and like, great, thank you. And then I say, what else?
Yeah.
And what they reveal after the what else is, well, I wasn't going to say this, but. And that's really where the information comes in.
I love it. I love it. Yes, that totally resonates. And so I would say that's point number 2, which is that we can overcome this problem. If you were asking me for 3 points, number 1 is that we've got this problem, and I want to shine a spotlight on that and let us know that there's so much we're not learning from the people around us. But number 2 is we can do something about it. And you just gave an example of a beautiful question that can help reveal some things that people would hold back. And so the centerpiece of the book is really, what can we do about this problem? And I introduce a method that I call the ask approach, which is 5 steps that we can take to really overcome this problem. And it starts honestly with getting curious, with to actually realize that there is, when you say, and what else? It's probably because you're curious. Is there something more that they're not telling me? And so,
well, so it goes back to what you said. Chances are, I'm thinking, all right, there's something else they're not telling me for a variety of reasons.
Exactly. And you're curious about that. So that's number 1, and then it moves on to actually creating the safety. How do we actually make it safe for people to tell us those things? And then how do we know what are the right questions to pose? And that question, and what else that you mentioned, is a great example of a quality question. And in the book, I talk about a whole range of different quality questions that people can
definitely
ask.
Read that.
Yes. It's almost, it's essentially trying to broaden our repertoire of what are the different questions that we can be asking. Because I think, to your point earlier, no one ever taught us how to ask questions. Most of us have a go-to question or 2 that we ask, and then a lot of questions that we ask that are kind of crummy questions. They're not actually really questions. They're more like leading questions, or trying to,
or they're saying stuff to let you know how smart they are.
Right. Totally. Totally. So then, so the ask approach goes to questions, then it goes, how do we listen well? And then it goes to, how do we reflect on what we've heard? And so that is all really the center of the book. And if you force me to boil it down, I'd say that's point number 2, is that we can do something about it. And here's how. Okay.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about reflection, or do you want to go to point number 3?
I would love to talk about reflection. So reflection, it's actually my favorite of the 5 steps of the ask approach.
Oh, okay.
And so I appreciate you asking about it. The reason it's my favorite is that reflection is how we squeeze the learning out of experiences. And we talked about earlier.
Hang on. Reflection is how we squeeze the learning out of experiences. I love that. Love that.
Thank you. Yeah. And as we established earlier, I'm a learning junkie. And so anything that helps us squeeze the learning out of something, I think reflection sometimes gets a bad rap, because people think, it's going to take too long. I'm going to have to go on a meditation retreat. I'm going to have to, whatever, to reflect. I can't reflect. But I break it down into a very simple process that I call sift it and turn it. So sift it is just simply to say, how do I sift out what's the most important thing that someone said to me? If they told me 10 things, what are the 2 or 3 most important ones? And how do I let that go? And I can let the rest of that go, because not everything that people tell us we need to take in. Sometimes it's not good for us to take in as well. And so sifting it is really to say, all right, of what they said, where's the gold and what can I let go of? And sometimes we can sift it on our own. We can look back at our notes, we can journal, we can think it through. But I often I encourage people to say, sift it with a friend or a partner so that they can help you sift through what's really important for you and what you can let go of. Because sometimes we don't make, we don't all make the right choices in our own assumptions, but a friend can help us do this, or a colleague. And then once we've sifted it, then it's time to turn it. And turn it just simply means turn it over in your mind 3 times. And the first turn is what I call story level reflection, which is to say, how does what I heard from this person shift my story? Does it, did it adjust my story about them or myself or the issue about what's going on? That's the first turn. The second turn is steps. So what steps can I take based on what I learned? Maybe I need to apologize. Maybe I need to double down on my position. Maybe I need to go invest in something, but there's different steps that I can take. And the third turn is what I call stuff. Is there anything I heard in here that sheds light or pushes me on my deeper stuff? Maybe there's some bias that I have, or some assumption that I'm holding, or some way of being that I have. And this gives me a little insight into something that I might tweak. And
that's why you need the partner to do it with.
That's where a partner can really help you to do that. Yeah. Partner, a coach, a therapist, a friend, anyone who can really, lovingly help you get out of your own stuff to do it. So sift it and turn it is the process of reflection. But I call it reflect and reconnect, because it's not just enough to reflect and have these insights and take them away for yourself. The reconnection is going back to the other person and closing the loop with them and saying, thank you for what you shared with me. That might not have been easy. I appreciate the risk that you took. And here's what I learned from you. And here's what I'm going to do about what I learned. And here's how it's changing me. And by the way, how does that match what you were hoping I was going to learn? And is there something different you would be hoping that I was going to learn? And that reconnection, I think, is so rare, but it really leaves the other person feeling like I didn't waste my time. They were really open.
You're giving them the gift of telling them that they were heard.
They were heard.
That's what people want to be heard.
They were heard. They were self-expressed. They actually had an impact on you. They were powerful in a way that they might not have even realized that they were powerful. And I think that reconnection just radically increases the chances that people will want to share over time and brings you closer as well. So that's a little bit of a deeper dive on the 5th step of the Ask approach. And
the third takeaway.
Let's just say the third takeaway is that this is a muscle that any of us can build. It is, when I mentioned this guy, Chris Argyris, originally, when I said
only 100 times,
only 100 times, I said to him, how long does it take to learn these tools and methods? And he looked back at me and he said, about as long as it takes to get mediocre at tennis. It's not something that you're going to learn tomorrow. It's like, you're not just going to learn it through, a 5-minute conversation or a quick training, but it's also not something that, it's like this mysterious thing that takes a lifetime to learn. These are things that are learnable. You can take, 10 tennis lessons and play a mediocre game, game of tennis if you practice a little bit. And so what I want to say is that this is learnable by individuals. There's also a chapter in the book that says this is learnable by teams and organizations. You can build a set of routines and rituals that help you get better at this. There's a chapter on this is learnable by young people. And how do we actually raise curious question askers? And then my ultimate hope is that this is learnable by our society. That when we look at someone who seems like the enemy or seems like I can have nothing in common with this person,
we have to get out of our echo chambers,
and we can be in this mindset of what can they teach me? There's something I can learn from them, even if I think that I completely disagree with everything they stand for. There's still something I can learn, and if I can put myself in this mindset of what can I learn from this person, we can find a lot more common ground than we realized before.
Yeah, I will tell you, Jeff. Full disclosure, this is not. It's a little embarrassing to share, but I have to really work on practicing that I can learn from everybody if I don't like somebody.
Yeah.
Like if I don't like you, I tend to want to I'm like, well, no, stop. Like just because I don't like you doesn't mean there's not something to learn from you. And I have to work on that probably all the time.
I mean, you're not alone. I feel the same way. I think there's a quote that I think came from Abraham Lincoln, but I'm going to go back and verify it.
I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better.
I need to get to know him better. Exactly. That's the quote. And I think that speaks to what you just said.
A Team of Rivals. I mean, that for history, you got to read that book.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Okay. I think Doris Goodwin Kearns, wrote it. Okay. So one more question.
Yeah.
Okay. Imagine you have a huge box in front of you, huge, and in it contains everything that you've ever lost in your life. What's the one thing you would reach in and pick out, and why?
I love that. I love that question. I'm going to sit with it to make sure I really give it justice. My mind first went to relationships with my grandparents who are no longer with us. And I wish that I could go back, spend more time with them, ask them more questions, learn more from them, because they were incredible people. We started this whole conversation.
You're such a people person. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's who you are. Yeah.
There was magic in my family, and I would love to reclaim some of that.
What a great legacy and an honor you're giving them. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for the question.
There's so much to that question. It tells me so much in a group dynamic. I'll share a lot with maybe another time.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, I want you to unabashedly promote yourself. Tell people how they can learn more about your company, Transcend, how they can get the book Ask, where you would like them to get it. Totally promote yourself.
Oh, so Transcend is a national nonprofit organization, and you can learn more at transcendeducation.org. So there's lots on the website. There's actually a book that we're coming out with at the end of this year called Extraordinary Learning for All, which is essentially summarizing what we've learned in our first 10 years at Transcend, and lifting up the stories of the most visionary communities across the country. So I would go there for that. You can learn more about Ask, the book, at www.askapproach.com. Askapproach.com. Exactly. Okay. You can get the book anywhere books are sold. It's called Ask, Tap into the Hidden Wisdom of People Around You for Unexpected Breakthroughs in Leadership and Life. And then I love to connect with people. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Jeff Wetzler. Just connect with me. I'd love to stay in dialogue with people.
Okay. And my last question for real. Anything else?
Oh, there it is. Just to say thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like you have modeled many of the types of questions and curiosity that this book is about, as well as the safety to have just a deep and beautiful conversation. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. Okay. So people, this was amazing. I encourage, and myself included, everybody to not walk, but run to your computer or your bookstore and order Jeff's book, Ask. You can hear the wisdom oozing from this man. I feel like the day he was born until currently, he has been nothing but about the people. And I think we can all agree that the world needs more people like Jeff, filled with curiosity and wisdom as well. And that concludes today's podcast episode of Dr. Patty Ann's podcast. Please go get the book Ask. And as I said earlier, I knew you would love this episode. So make sure you share, comment, like, and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, be well.